we provide free devotion clinics every Friday in different mosques. All Alhamdulillah mosques across GTA invite us over, except for prayer issues. First of all, I need to know if English is okay or yeah or no. Okay, so let's use our first option language. So once again, my name is Hussaini Assari and I practice immigration law. I've been practicing it for the last 20 years. My wife is a charitable law and also an immigration litigation lawyer. She also visited Calgary, but she's not here. So, now, so first of all, I would like to present a brief overview of some aspects of immigration practice which are very directly relevant to our communities in Canada. And then we will proceed with a question and answer session. Feel free to ask me questions about immigration law, and I'll try my level best to answer it. Most of the practice is about sponsorships. Because when we immigrate to Canada, when our children grow up, we would like our children to get married in our own culture, in our own religion. So majority of parents prefer, and youngsters as well, to get married in their own countries of origin. When they go there, find a bride or groom and then get married, there are certain provisions of the immigration law that apply on them. So it's called the spousal sponsorship. Now the spousal sponsorship can be done in two forms. If both the spouses are in Canada and one is a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, there is an in-Canada spousal sponsorship provision. And if the one spouse is overseas and the other is here, and the person in Canada is a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, he or she can sponsor the spouse overseas. So they are different. So I'm going to try to answer those questions that we deal with on a daily basis, and when somebody has a specific question, we can deal with that. So whenever somebody wishes to sponsor a spouse, the first question usually is, can I sponsor a spouse because I may or may not have the minimum income required? So one can sponsor spouse-independent children even if he or she, the sponsor, does not meet the minimum income required criteria, as long as they are not on social assistance. They can be on employment insurance, EI, they can be on Canada Pension Plan, they can be on the provincial disability assistance, and sponsor a spouse. But the only disqualification is that they cannot be on welfare, social assistance if they wish to sponsor a spouse. The second usual question is how long it's going to take. Now that depends on where the spouse is currently residing. So let's say if it's Pakistan. The Government of Canada's website clearly says that an immigration application arising out of Pakistan in a spouse's case takes approximately 17 months. Now it could be less, it could be more, that depends on a few things. Number one, the spousal sponsorships from Pakistan are not processed in Islamabad High Commission anymore. They are all processed at Canadian High Commission, London. That has become the processing center of all spousal and parental sponsorships for Pakistani cases. The processing time, as I said, is approximately 17 months. But it could be shorter or longer depending on the situation of the case. The third question we are asked usually is whether rukhsati or consummation of marriage is a legal requirement. No, it is not a legal requirement. However, unless and until there is consummation of marriage between a man and a wife, which is commonly called rukhsati, Pakistani cases, Afghani cases, majority of cases from Muslim countries will have a lot of difficulty in getting approved. So if rukhsati has not yet taken place and the case is still under process and Immigration Canada is asking several questions about genuineness of marriage, and they clearly say, we don't believe that this marriage is a genuine marriage because there has not been a rukhsati. They actually use the word rukhsati. So the usual advice is, if you still have time, go through the rukhsati. Provide them with documentary evidence that the rukhsati has taken place. There are special cultural and religious ceremonies about the rukhsati. Provide them photographic evidence that, you know, the girl has been given away by the parents and all the cultural and religious requirements have been fulfilled. Another interesting question is whether a telephonic nikah, a nikah over the phone, nikah over Skype, nikah over whatever social media is acceptable for sponsorship to Canada. Not anymore. Since 2013, the government of Canada does not accept any nikah whereby both the spouses did not sign the contractual agreement in person at the same time, at the same place. So the nikah should be in person. The husband and wife, the bride and groom should be at the same place, same time, signing the contract. So these are the few important things. Now, one common problem, especially in Pakistani cases, is that in some cases, in mostly rural areas, marriages are not registered. These are genuine marriages. The couples even have children, but the marriage was not registered. And then one of the spouse comes to Canada, and because he or she did not have registered nikah nama at that time, they misrepresent the fact that they have been married. And that entails a very long, troubling endeavor for them, because there is a section of the law 117(9) whereby once you do not declare a relative at the time of your own immigration application, practically speaking, except for humanitarian compassionate grounds, you can never bring them to Canada as a spouse, as parents, brothers, sisters, whatnot. So these are some basics about spousal sponsorship. The other kind of sponsorship is the sponsorship for parents and grandparents. Every December, the government opens up a quota of 5,000 to 10,000 cases, whereby people who meet the minimum income required for the last 3 years, so we are in 2016, so we are talking about 2013, 14, and 15. And if you are able to meet that income requirement according to your notice of assessments from Revenue Canada for the last 3 years, you'll be able to sponsor your parents or grandparents to Canada. It's a two-step process. In the first step, the sponsors' applications are filed. Once they are approved, then you file the parents or grandparents' applications. In parents and grandparents' application, medical admissibility becomes a very big issue, because especially grandparents, if they do not qualify the medical, they won't be able to immigrate to Canada, parents as well. However, the other problem is that if I sponsor my parents and grandparents, and if I have income for the last 3 years, and I'm able to sponsor them today, and the government takes 5-6 years in processing their application, and if they want an update of my financial situation as a sponsor a few years from now, and if I do not still meet the low income or minimum income required criterion, my sponsorship can be refused. These are unfortunate scenarios. However, this happens on a daily basis. The political will is not there to resolve these situations. And unfortunately, a lot of parents and grandparents thus cannot immigrate to Canada in these situations. Now, for parents and grandparents, there is also a temporary visa. It's a special visa called the super visa. There is nothing super about this visa, however, the name is super visa. Where if you are well off, if you can qualify the minimum income required for the last 1 year, you can sponsor parents or grandparents. And this sponsorship is not for permanent residence, this is a temporary residence. However, you also have to buy medical insurance for your parents and grandparents, and this is a special medical insurance that is called super visa medical insurance. In certain cases, it becomes quite expensive. However, they can be here for up to 10 years, but the visas are stamped up to 2 years. So every entry into Canada is valid for these super visa parents, grandparents in Canada for up to 2 years, and then before the 2 years expire, you will have to get that renewed and extended, and then they can reside for another 2 years. And you need to continue meeting the low income cutoff, the minimum required income as a sponsor, and continue buying the medical insurance for that. So these are the two most prevalent sponsorship cases. There are many other things that we commonly call sponsorships, but they are not sponsorships. For example, if you wish to invite a relative or a friend to Canada for a visit, it's commonly called a sponsorship. Actually, it is not. It's just a letter or affidavit of invitation that you send to your friend or relative, inviting them to visit Canada for a specific period of time. Now, so these were the sponsorships. Moving on, we can talk about permanent residence. Now, most of us immigrated to Canada as either skilled workers or entrepreneurs, some as investors. Now, skilled worker immigration has been restricted tremendously. The current program is called the Express Entry Program. There is nothing express in that program. There's a name called Express, and unfortunately there's not even entry in the program. The Express Entry Program, on one hand, allows applicants under three classifications, three occupational classification categories. One is A, O, and B. So A is managerial, O is administrative, B is technical. So this is a good thing because there are thousands of occupational classifications under which people can apply. However, anybody who has never been to Canada, who has never studied in Canada, who has never worked in Canada, or currently is not in Canada, will not qualify to be processed under this application program called Express Entry. The reason being that although majority of educated people from all over the world will qualify to apply, the Government of Canada every month or the second month announces a target score. And they say Canadian rankings score CRS of 580, for example, or 530. So once they announce this 530, 580 or whatever number, they pick up the cases from that number onwards. So the usual number that they process is around 700 cases every month, and majority of these applicants are already either international students or foreign workers that are already in Canada because they get additional points for being here, for studying here, for having job offers in Canada. So bringing in Express Entry was an idea of the government to restrict skilled worker immigrations. However, the provinces did step forward and they brought in their own provincial nominee programs. So Alberta had a good provincial nominee program, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario had a good provincial nominee program where provinces would say, well, we need these number of people of these specific criterions, and they would process. So these nominee programs are under an agreement between the federal government and the provincial government. However, unfortunately, once again, all these programs, except for Quebec, are now adopted under the Express Entry program. So, unless and until you qualify to be processed under Express Entry program, you will not be processed for the provincial nomination. However, if you have ties to a certain province, so let's say I'm in Pakistan, I wish to apply, and I have a brother who's already in Alberta, that allows me to opt for Alberta's provincial nominee program, or Manitoba's provincial nominee program, or BC's provincial. So if I have ties to that specific province, if I went to school here, for example, came here, did my graduation or studies, and went back, that gives me a connection to this province that I can try to use a provincial nomination. The best way for our friends and relatives who are educated overseas, wish to come to Canada and as skilled workers or is to try to find through us, through our friends and relatives who are already in Canada, offers of employment. That is called the process of labor market impact assessment. It used to be called LMO, now it's called LMIA. So from opinion, it has gone to an assessment. So if you want your brother, cousin, friend to immigrate to Canada, and if you can find them an offer of employment that would qualify under the LMIA process through Service Canada, please do so, because that would give them additional 400 to 600 points, and thus they will be under the CRS and they will be picked up and processed. And yes, for them, the processing time will be quite reasonable. We are talking about year to year and a half. Now, entrepreneur program, the federal entrepreneur program, which was one of the most successful programs of Canadian immigration history, where people with entrepreneurial skills, business management experience, and capital would come to Canada, invest in businesses, generate employment, pay revenue to the government, somehow, for some reason, has been closed. So there is no federal entrepreneur immigration program. Similarly, there used to be an investor class program where people would pay exorbitant amount of money. The last target amount was 800,000 Canadian dollars, invested with the government of Canada for a period of 5 years. Even that program has been abolished, and it's not there anymore. Quebec, every year or two, opens up some vacancies of that program, and believe you me, people charter planes to land at Montreal airport, file those applications and go back. So it's very much in demand, good for Canada, but somehow it has been closed. Now, what is available, open, and is applicable on our community and our friends and relatives overseas, in addition to the express entry, is something what we call self-employed category. It may not be open on all of us, for all of us, but a number of us come from areas where there is still agriculture. We come from agricultural families, we come from families that have farming background. So the self-employed category, there are provincial nominee programs, there is also a federal program, is open to farmers. It's not an easy application. There is a lot of creative work that has to be done, and that's why most of consultants and lawyers don't really like to do that. However, if you have friends, relatives who have agricultural land in their name, are involved in agricultural supervisory duties, activities, they have, in Pakistan we say abiyana, the water tax, receipts in their names, the seeds are bought by them. So if they are involved practically, may even be part-time, but if they are involved practically in agricultural activities, that's a very good program. It may take 2 to 3 years to process. However, the threshold of qualification is quite low, which I just mentioned to you. And this is something that most of us don't think about. There is, in our part of the world, there is a whole generation who's now educated or semi-educated and is involved in agricultural activities. Canada needs agriculturists. Look around in Alberta. Alberta has a tremendous farmer program, but the investment requirement is quite high, whereby in the federal program, there is no specific investment requirement. It's not even a conditional immigration. So if I come to Canada as a self-employed farmer, and for some reason I'm unable to establish a farming business in Canada, I'm not breaking any law. I've given my intention, I make my effort. If it doesn't work, there is no negative impact on my immigration. So it's not a conditional immigration. So think about, when you talk to your friends and families, think about the farmer category of application. In our communities, somehow or the other, refugees are considered refugees. All of us come to Canada seeking refuge. It could be economic refuge, it could be personal refuge, but we all come here as refugees per se. My father invested all his life savings to come to Canada as an investor, but I very proudly say that I took refuge in Canada. So, refugee claims, there's some, because we are used to listening and talking about old refugee claims. Since December of 2012, the world has changed for the refugee claims. And I'm not talking about claimants like the Bosnian refugees or the Syrian refugees, because that is a separate class of government-identified processed overseas refugees. They are not even refugees when they land in Canada. They land in Canada and they are given permanent residence. So I'm talking about refugees like me. I'm a Shia. I go to Imambargah. I go to the Muharram Julus. I'm disliked. I may have made, certain comments somewhere, and suddenly these followers of Daesh are after me. Now, what do I do when I go to the law enforcement agencies in Pakistan? I don't get the protection that I require and deserve. Eventually, I have to escape. And there are many ways to escape, legal or illegal. And I land in Canada. There are two ways to land in Canada. One, you fly in. The second is only if you have close family members who are Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or determined refugees, or refugee claimants in process. And they are your parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, real uncle, aunt. Only then, or spouse of course, spouse or children, you can come into Canada as a refugee through United States, through the land border. You can come to the border, make a refugee claim. You will have to provide documentary evidence that you have a close relative in Canada. You have to provide evidence that this is my relationship, that this person is Canadian citizen, permanent resident, refugee or refugee in process in Canada. Only then one will be allowed entry in Canada through US as a refugee claimant. In both these situations, you have the right to make a refugee claim and get it processed at Immigration and Refugee Board. Now, we are actually, even now, although the process in the law was changed in December of 2012, but we are still used to thinking refugee claimants will have years before they get their hearing. There are still some refugee claimants who are still waiting for their hearing, but these are the legacy cases which are pre-December 2012, and due to whatever reason they have not been finalized. Anybody coming today, his or her refugee claim will be processed and finalized within 60 days, 2 months. So not only you have to make a claim, You have to prepare at least 6 forms to make a refugee claim. Then you have administrative, bureaucratic interview, and then you have the hearing at the Immigration and Refugee Board, all within 60 days, and you have to provide a documentary evidence as well in those 60 days. So it's a front-loaded exercise. However, because this has restricted the claims drastically, we used to have thousands of refugee claims from Pakistan. We now don't even have hundreds. The rate of approval has gone up. As long as the case is reasonable, as long as it qualifies and it's within the Convention of United Nations, most of the cases are accepted. There are no guarantees, but if the case is processed properly, on an average across Canada, the rate of approval is 50%, which is a good rate of approval because just across the border, the rate of approval is 10 to 15%. However, in the United States, if somebody asks for asylum and if they are denied, which over 80% are denied, they can go to the courts, motions to reopen and whatnot, and it takes, 8, 10, 15 years. And then they have amnesty schemes coming out so people get regularized. In Canada, we don't expect that because unfortunately, yes, we would love to have photos taken with Syrian refugees. But on the other hand, these Syrian refugees that we are so proud of are brothers and sisters coming to Canada. A family of 6 people is getting $40 a day for food. And in Vancouver, for example, they're being kept in 2-bedroom hotel rooms. Now, if I have a family and if I'm getting $40 a day for food, and if I can cook at home, that's fine. But with $40 a day, you cannot satisfactorily feed a family of 4 every day. So we have forgotten. We have taken our photo ops at the airport. We have, become the name synonymous with the refugees. But when it comes to are we taking care of them, unfortunately we are not. There was a Senate committee report by the government senators, and Senator Munson, a senior Liberal senator, almost cried when he was narrating that report. And he said, I was so proud that we brought in these refugees, and I'm so ashamed of narrating this report. So if you know any refugee families, please make them friends, help them out. And it's very easy, very convenient, and a lot of them from Syria may not be Shias, but they are great people. And Syrians, and I've never been to Syria, but they're very open-hearted to the Shias. They call us Fatimis. And they are very open-hearted. So that was out of the discussion. However, if you know Syrians or any refugees, make them friends. They are good, very good people. And yes, they all know their places of birth, by the way. That's very important as well, unlike Mr. Bakri. So we talked about the refugees. 60 days, you make your claim, the decision is out. So it's a front-loaded exercise. If somebody is thinking of making a refugee claim, be very well prepared, because unlike the good old days, we have to actually prove to Immigration and Refugee Board that things for Shias are very bad in Pakistan. And it's, for us, it's very easy to prove because we have the documentary evidence. However, it's not very easy for us to convince them if they don't want to be convinced. So be very well prepared. Make sure our friends who are making refugee claims don't take things easily. Now, if somebody's refugee claim is denied, they have or they may have the right to appeal to a refugee appeal division. So within 15 days you have to make that appeal. And it's an appeal, it's not judicial review. It's an appeal to Refugee Appeal Division of Immigration and Refugee Board. And after filing the appeal, you have 15 days to perfect the appeal, meaning provide additional documentary evidence and detailed submissions. Refugee Appeal Division is a very good stepping stone. Even if you are denied in the Refugee Appeal Division, you can go to the federal court judicial review through a federal court lawyer. So in a lot of Pakistani refugee claims, Refugee Appeal Division may deny the appeal, however, the decision becomes challengeable to the Federal Court of Canada, and there in the judicial review, we have a reasonably good chance. Prior to that, when Refugee Appeal Division was not enforced, we used to had to go directly to the federal court, and because federal court was not an appeal, their mandate is very narrow. It's just a judicial review, so we were not able to argue new things. However, with Refugee Appeal Division, we can update our claim, provide new documentary evidence as well. So I was allowed 30 minutes, I have taken 30 minutes or more. I'm open for questions. आप मुझसे उर्दू में अंग्रेजी में सवाल पूछ सकते हैं और मैं जवाब देने की कोशिश करूँगा. The minimum qualification criteria is that you own your agricultural land, that you actively participate in the agricultural activity. Because they require an IELTS exam, International English Language Testing Service exam, but the band required is only 5 bands. So if somebody, I usually recommend people that if you have minimum 12 grades, and if you can score minimum 5 bands in IELTS, that's a good program to apply. There is no amount written anywhere, but the rule of thumb is, for example, in Pakistani cases, if your net worth is around a minimum of 100,000 Canadian dollars, it's a reasonably good case. It could be all for the land ownership, or it could be, for example, if you have a warehouse, or if you have equipment, farming equipment, those things can be combined as well.
What is the scope when they come here? Say, for instance, somebody applies on a farmer basis, and they come here. What is the scope of the activities that they need to do here?
As I said earlier, sir, it's not conditional immigration. So if I come to Canada as a farmer, and if I'm unable to get into farming business, there's no negative impact on my immigration. However, the scope is very vast. I have seen clients who have gone into agricultural business. It's very different from South Asia, of course. The crop is different, the cultivation is different. However, because of our farmers are very sturdy, very aggressive, very hardworking people, the people who actually go into this business, they do very well. Most of our farmers are usually either unable to or unwilling to buy land here because it becomes very expensive. They lease land and eventually they till and fertilize and whatnot. And I know a few people who in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, who went into that business, and they are big farmers now in Canada. So, for example, the Sikh community from India, they are big into farming in British Columbia, fruit farming.
What about the livestock farming?
Yes, so that qualifies as well. That's a very, very important point. So, livestock farming, fish farming, these things also qualify under farming class. So, poultry farmers, they qualify under this as well. Yes, you need to show that you own the farm, you need to show that you manage the farm, you are personally involved in that. But when it comes to the agriculture, when you have fruit farms, for example, or you're cultivating produce, the documentary evidence required there is different than the documentary evidence required for poultry farming, for example, because this is more of a business than farming. So the documentary evidence required will be more of a business than agriculture.
You also talked about the threshold of income for supporting the parents or the grandparents. What's the range?
Well, that depends on the number of family of the sponsor. So let's say somebody wants to sponsor their mother and father, and he has a wife and 2 children. So there are 4 people here, 2 he would like to get here sponsored. So there is a table called minimum income required, and on that table, whatever number for 6 people is given. So I believe it's $52,000 or $57,000. But to sponsor for permanent residents, this minimum required income MRI table is for the last 3 years.
So it has to be.
So you have been making an X amount of money in 2014, 15, and 16 to be able to sponsor coming December.
And the evidence will be the income tax.
Yes, notice of assessment.
Notice of
Yes.
assessment.
I have a question. If somebody filed a refugee claim in Ontario and eventually wants to move down to Calgary, is it easy for them to transfer their case here, or is it kind of hard to do that?
Well, you can always make a request to change the, we call it a bench location. However, it's entirely dependent on the refugee board. This is a federal board. The process is federal, and now they do half of the hearings on teleconference, video conference, sorry. So if they decide to allow your request, that's fine. But if they don't, you appear at the refugee board in Calgary, and the member could be in Ontario, and you can have the hearing through the video conference.
So the location doesn't matter.
Not anymore, no. Now, in some cases, for example, in Calgary's situation, because Vancouver does the administrative work for Calgary, although Calgary has its own station members, but all the administrative work is done from Vancouver. So they look at the number of claims under process as one for Calgary and Vancouver. If that number is not high, they may allow you to move, they may allow the file to move here. However, if it's a new case, the chances of change of location are non-existent, because remember, it has to be finalized within 60 days. So when they move a file, वो फाइल पैदल चल के आती है, तो 60 दिन में तो यहाँ पहुँचेगी नहीं. So it's, I don't think they will.
अगर कोई क्या कहते हैं ओंटारियो में बॉर्डर क्रॉस किया है, उसने उसका भाई कैलगरी में है, उस सिचुएशन में.
Well, so yes, in that situation, the file should be transferred automatically by the refugee board to Calgary if at the port of entry making a refugee claim, at the time of making a refugee claim, the claimant mentions that he is going to live in Calgary. However, it's advisable that if somebody does so, then he also makes a request to confirm that the application has been moved. Because once again, it's only 60 days. So if they don't do it and you get a hearing within 60 days, then you don't have the time to get it processed and get it moved here.
We can get the LMO by name, or sometimes we write that people got the LMO but visa was refused.
Yes, it is a possibility. When Alberta was doing a lot of labor market opinions, almost 30 to 40% cases were being denied in terms of permanent residence and work permits. More for work permits than permanent residence. So that's always a possibility. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We thank Brother Ali Naqvi for coming here and elaborating on immigration. In fact, the information provided here were very significant and very important. And as Brother Naqvi mentioned in the beginning, that unfortunately they've been offering this facility, this counseling in Toronto for years. But so far no mosque has volunteered to host them, to allow them to hold this type of free program for the community. This is a really shocking experience and shocking news. And it clearly proves that unfortunately we don't walk the talks of Ahlulbayt alayhimu salatu wasalam. On one hand we say that Imam Muhammad Baqir and Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhimu salatu wasalam, they were teaching physics, chemistry in the mosques. And on the other hand, we are not allowing such experts, such jewels, such heroes of our community to come and elaborate on such important topics. हम दुआ करते हैं खुदावंद मुताल की बारगाह में अली नकवी भाई की कामयाबी के लिए और इंशाअल्लाह अल्लाह सुब्हानहू व तआला इनको जज़ाए खैर दे कि वो इस तरह का इनिशिएटिव लिए हुए हैं।